Hey everybody, Tom Hunyady here, and what the hell is going on with Two Legs? Well, stick around and you're gonna find out. Hi, McCartney fans, and welcome to the season premiere of Two Legs, a Paul McCartney podcast. I am one of your two hosts, Tom Hunyady, and you may also know me from my other videocast/podcast, Talk More Talk, where we talk all solo Beatles all the time. Well, you might be asking yourself, where's Two Legs been? What's going on with Two Legs? Well, I will tell you. After the season finale, my wonderful co-host of 3 seasons, Dave Gargalino, decided he wanted a divorce. I then went into a drunken, lost weekend to where I just, stayed in bed and drank whiskey the whole time. But no, just kidding. Yeah, I grew my beard out and I was just a drunken mess. But all kidding aside, my cousin David decided he wanted to pursue other dreams that he's been wanting to do. My cousin is a musician, so he's wanting to get back into performing and writing and all of that. So David, I wish him the best of luck there. In 2009, I was fortunate enough to get reintroduced to my cousin David at my wedding, and then I realized, or we both realized, how big of Beatle fans we were and solo Beatle fans, and we have been texting each other nonstop, and it's been a lot of fun doing this show with David for the last 3 years. I can't think of anybody I would wanted to do this show with, but as always, things change, people move on, and David put a lot of time and effort into the show, and I'll always be grateful for what he did for the show. If it wasn't for him, the show wouldn't have been possible, because he did all that technical stuff that goes right over my head. So I'm very grateful for the time that David spent working with me on the show. But alas, things change. I debated whether or not to continue on with the show, and I was thinking maybe I'd just become one of those YouTubers. But anyways, I reached out to a couple people, and I was fortunate enough to to catch a new co-host, if you will. And I'm very lucky to have him on board. I want to introduce to the two-leg fan base, one Mr. Andy Nicholes to the show. He's going to be my new co-host. And Andy, hello, and how you doing, buddy?
Hey, Tom. Thanks so much for that lovely intro, and giving props to Dave for making Two Legs what it was, along with you. And it's a pleasure to be a part of the show. Thank you.
You got it. You're welcome. I'm glad you are here. The theme music that you heard before all this yabbish is that was 1995. That was from a buddy of mine, Dylan Sevey. He will be on next week to talk about all the music he did for this show. So stay tuned for that next week. But for now, it's just going to be Andy and I. And Andy, I looking you up and finding out more about you, I'm just really impressed with all everything that you've done over the last 5 years or so. I mean, it's pretty impressive. So why don't you just give everybody a little info on your background, and let's talk about you for a few minutes and your love for all things Beatles.
Sure. Thanks again, Tom. Well, I'm a second generation Beatle fan. But obviously I'm very passionate about the solo stuff. More so probably than even the Beatles, as most of us that do this stuff are, right?
Right. Yeah.
Early fandom, I just was drawn to the solo stuff more because I kind of go against the grain with what's popular. I mean, the popular stuff is great, but I was always drawn to the stuff that didn't sell or wasn't as well known. And for that reason, I dived into McCartney, and it may not make sense, but I think it does because, I mean, obviously his well-known hits are so well-known, but I kind of gravitated towards the things that people didn't talk about or the obscure albums that, you didn't recognize or didn't really generate much conversation. So that was kind of my entry into discovering McCartney. It was, obviously we knew the hits, but I really wanted to learn about the other stuff that nobody talked about. Okay, take for example, Red Rose Speedway. Okay, it's got my love. Okay, but what else on that album? Okay, I don't know these other songs, so let's just test them out. And like I said, I'm in my 30s, so I'm a second generation fan. So I discovered these recordings through my dad's collection and my uncle's collection, and I just put them on and just listen to them for what they were without any kind of opinion, whether it was good or bad or indifferent, and made the determination that these albums are pretty freaking good.
Yeah, but what made you put those albums on? I mean, were you listening to them, with your dad and uncle, or did you just notice them?
I've always had an affinity for music from the earliest age. I gravitated towards it for whatever reason. To borrow a line from a Beach Boys song, music is in my soul from the Sunflower album. It's just something I always gravitated to. It was a comfort, and I felt very safe surrounded by music. And those albums, obviously, they were in my family's collection, so obviously somebody that I was close to thought they were good. And I kind of, now obviously I've taken it to a little bit of a next level and extreme,
right,
according to my family, but that's okay. And
you can just say that you're a bigger fan now.
Yeah, I clearly I am.
Right.
But that was kind of like my intro into the music, was just kind of going against the grain and kind of just seeing what was out there that was kind of largely not talked about, or even reading early Beatle biographies, seeing what all these albums, that are kind of just glossed over. And that was kind of the initial, this is like 10 years worth of music, say like the Wings period. It's not even addressed. You read general biographies on the Beatles or Paul McCartney, it's not even really talked about. It's like airbrushed over, right? And that was kind of like, well, I want to learn about this music and I want to dissect it, line by line. I want to learn every nuance about the song, from track one to the last one, where it was recorded, who was on it, all those things. So that was kind of like that absence of history in the existing literature that was out there. It's kind of what drove me to learn this music initially.
Okay, gotcha. So what were some of the as you're discovering all these albums that you've never heard before from Paul McCartney, whether it was solo, Wings, experimental? What were some of the albums that stuck out for you that you enjoyed the most while you were experimenting with all this music?
Really early on, it would have been Red Rose Speedway, which still to me is my number one.
Wow.
It is. I don't know. We've had that conversation off air. Side one versus side two.
Right.
But for me, it's the perfect album still. I mean, I've known that album for about 25 years now. And for me, still, it's the classic from start to finish. I just like everything about it. I like that it's not popular. I love the medley. And the medley is really derided by a lot of people. But I think it's one of the strongest things he's ever done, personally.
Right. Gotcha.
I do. Other early memories, I was a young kid when Flowers in the Dirt came out, so knowing already who Paul McCartney was and the context of the Beatles, that was kind of like the first, wow, this is a new album. So that was a very, very singular moment in my growing up and appreciation of Paul McCartney, was seeing the Flowers in the Dirt promotional machine that was, the videos, the promos, the interviews, the press, all that coming out was was pretty impactful for me as a young fan at the time. Right. And of course, a little later, I was a teenager for Flaming Pie. So that era, late 80s and to the mid to late 90s, were pretty important, parts of his discography in my career and in my fandom,
Give me a couple tracks that you fell in love with over the last few years too.
Oh, recently or back then?
Oh, back then, yeah. Let's go. Let's
I remember
start with
earliest. I remember going on the MPL Communications website, the old one.
Okay.
Right, and before YouTube, I mean, the internet was around, but there was no YouTube. And I remember seeing like songs that I had no idea about. And I remember seeing a listing for this song called "Once Upon a Long Ago," and Back on My Feet, and I'm like, I don't know that song at all. And here at that time, I was still like in my teenager, and I'm like, I don't know that song at all.
And you wouldn't know the song because it wasn't released.
It wasn't released here.
Right.
And I'm like, and then I remember on his old site, they had like 30-second samples. You could listen to it through like Real Player. I'm dating myself there, right?
Right.
But you could play it, and I'm like, that sounds really good. So I used to spend my summers in New York City visiting family and stuff like that. And I remember finally going through the the McCartney section in the store and finding the 12-inch import. And I think it was like $10. You know, so and that was in the middle of the summer, but I might as well have been like a kid on Christmas finding that. So that's probably one of my favorites. Just two, A side, B side of his all time are those two songs.
Yeah.
Shame that the record company at the time when he was pushing that for All the Best didn't feel that they wanted to include it as a single in this country, because as you know, it did pretty well overseas, especially in other foreign countries in Europe. It did really well, featuring wonderful violin playing by Nigel Kennedy on that track. So it's just a shame that it I think it could have been done so much better, and I think unfortunately over the course of his career, he's kind of been poo-pooed by the record company for certain for one reason or the other to not include it. But going through things like that and actually painstakingly finding songs that weren't not known any other way, and going through the process again. Now you just YouTube it, right, or you Spotify it, and you find it. But back then it was a labor of love to actually find something like it, and then make it a journey to go actually buy it, and then but then there was no guarantee. I mean, you may not like it, it may not be good. And I got it, and I'm like, this is like the greatest song I've ever heard. And then And
then you flip it over, and then so were you familiar with who this McManus guy was?
No, not at the time. Not at the time. Right. I'm like, McCartney McManus. Who is this McManus? McManus. Oh, okay. But then I actually connected the dots by looking in the Flowers and the Dirt liner notes, because by that point I had known that album was co-written largely with Elvis Costello. So I'm like, that's Costello. So this is Costello too, and I made the correlation.
Right. Well, it's funny because Flaming Pie. I mean, not Flaming Pie, but Flowers in the Dirt. Even though I was a big fan of My Brave Face, the other stuff, the whole album as a whole was not necessarily one of my favorites. So I wasn't like one of those that buried my face into the credits and stuff like that. So it wasn't up until maybe 10 years ago where I realized like McManus was Elvis Costello, because I just didn't really. I mean, I just didn't care, really to find out who the hell this McManus guy was. So,
you're going through it and you're like, okay, unless you're a diehard Costello fan, you're not going to know that.
Right. So that's great. Yeah. I love that stuff. But what's cool too is about if you want to talk about the time you spent in Liverpool, because it's really amazing that you were able to get your education there.
Thank you for bringing that up. Liverpool's near and dear to my heart. I attended Liverpool Hope University from 2010 to 2012. And the major that I worked on and studied while I was over there was called the Beatles, Popular Music and Society, which some people laugh at and say, wait, a master's in the Beatles? But I can sit here and tell you 7-8 years later from graduating, it was singularly the hardest thing that I ever had to do, because this was not a cakewalk. It was a real rigorous academic course.
Well, give me an example. I mean, what did you find tough about it?
It was everything from studying fandom, semiotics, popular music theory. Why?
So it just wasn't about the band itself.
No, this was not a paint by numbers course on what did the Beatles do on January 6, 1962. Right. This was not that, and I know some of my classmates went into that thinking that. And listen, I would be I did too a little bit, but we learned very quickly that this was going to be a very, very deep, intense study of popular music, and why it should be analyzed, and why popular music should be an accepted form of study on a higher education level at a university. Classical music is studied and appreciated, no problem. This course was a defense of popular music and why it should be studied. And we read works of Philip Tagg and Brian Longhurst, and of course we read a lot of Ken Womack's books as well, and they served us very, very well over there. So it was really an awakening to history, England at the time, learning about the makeup of England during the time of the Beatles when they were kids in the 1950s, and what systematic things were in place to allow them to become a successful band, know. And that's really what it was. And it was a year and a half long course of study, and I made a lot of great friends who I still am in touch with to this day through social media. Some of them are they've lived there. They came from America and they stayed there. And I think that's wonderful. But
let everybody know exactly how many people can say that they have this title.
Well, I am proud to say that I am one of 75 people worldwide that have this degree.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's impressive.
Thank you. It was like I said, it was a labor of love, and I went into it, studying something that obviously I was passionate about, but gained a whole new appreciation for the ability to write, research, and boy, let me tell you, research. I think I spent weeks upon weeks researching at the British Library, combing through contemporary sources for and going through literary reviews and all those things. So it's a proud moment in my career, and one that I'm so fortunate enough that I was able to go and be selected. I was only one of a handful of Americans selected to go, and I was in the second intake of the program.
Well, talk about the selection process. I mean, how did that work, and how did you even find out about a course like this?
It's funny. I graduated from undergraduate college with a degree in history and didn't really have anything else lined up. And my mother actually heard a radio advert on the radio, local oldie station here in the New York area, for a master's degree in Liverpool, study abroad. And she said, "You got to look into this. You're tailor-made for that." So I did and applied, thinking nothing of it. And sure enough, I got in.
Wow!
So
amazing.
Yeah, it was promoted, and it was again, it was just everything happened everything lined up perfectly for that to happen. And I graduated from undergraduate college in May, and by September I was on a plane going into another country by myself. Didn't really know anybody, and that was scary too. But it didn't take too long to make friends. As I said, several who I'm still very close to this day, and it was just a life-changing experience, and strongly encourage anybody that hasn't visited Liverpool to please do. They have to.
Well, I've found over the last 10 years or so that this Beatles community is a wonderful community, and making friends with these people, a lot of the Beatles people in the community, I mean, just lifelong friends, and they're just it's great to hang out with because not everybody appreciates the music of the Beatles and solos Beatles as much as this community does. So I mean the people that we get to talk about this stuff is kind of limited in a way.
Yeah.
So it's just wonderful to have this community that we can do this.
It is, and in that city too, it thrives on tourism, obviously, which is another aspect of the course we tackled. Why has Liverpool has actually grown over the last 30 years since Lennon's death because of the tour. The Beatles have brought tourism, to Liverpool. They were named the European Capital of Culture in 2008. Wow. I mean, so Liverpool pre-1980, was not given much thought. And I think after Lennon's assassination, things changed, and now it's the Beatles are a large reason why Liverpool tourism and Liverpool does as well as it does now.
Right. So you were also fortunate enough to meet some characters that played a big part in the Beatles' lives, weren't you?
Yes, yeah, we did. I got to meet on several occasions the late Alan Williams, who was the Beatles' first manager,
right?
who kind of got them the contact in Germany to play there. And Allen at the time, he's since passed, but Allen was a fixture at the world's famous Cavern Pub where the Beatles played. And Allen used to go down there every night and have quite a few, more than he can handle. But he was kind of he was a local legend, and the bouncers and the staff at the club knew him and they took care of him. But funny side story, he did actually insult in a drunken stupor a classmate of mine. And I actually had to put him in his place and say, Alan, that wasn't really nice. You were a little rude to my friend. Please don't do that again. So leave it to me to insult, somebody historical and famous who knew all four Beatles. But, that was just a little side story that happened, which we laugh about now when we talk about it. But he was a nice guy. He told us stories, again when he was sober, he did, but he did, and he was a nice fellow, and he's much missed.
Right. He had to have played one of the most important parts in their history by sending them to Hamburg, the few years in a row that he did, because, if not for that, who knows if they get all that time to perform and master their trade, and just perform, 8 hours, 10 hours a night and, become the band that they did.
Yeah, and I know his story, his place in this story, I think, as time has marched on, has actually painted him in a better light. I think in the first say 25 years post breakup, Alan Williams was really kind of his role in this story was brushed aside.
Right, but, he was the guy that gave him away.
Right, his own book from 1975, which actually Lennon actually stated at the time was a pretty accurate telling of what went on. Okay. So it's nice to see that the Beatles community as a whole has recognized his importance and his role in the story, which was very important because he went to incredible efforts, to get them there, to give them the gigs, and really when nobody else gave a care in the world about them, he did.
Gotcha. And then who else did you get to meet while you were there?
Briefly, we saw Jerry Marsden from Jerry and the Pacemakers one night. And he was a nice chap from Ferry Cross on the Mersey fame. He popped in one night. Nice guy. He walked in there a few times and really got to know the inner workings of the people that actually run the Cavern today, who are very tight with Paul McCartney's management. So we got to hear stories that you're never going to hear anywhere else. When he just pops in to visit family. And things like that. And that was actually a nice aspect of being in the course, because Liverpool is such a transient town, because there's tourists coming day and night and day and night. Because I was there such a long period of time, I was kind of accepted as a member of their community. I wasn't just a tourist. So many people, they go to Liverpool, they're there for a day or a week and they move on. I was there for a prolonged period of time, so I really got to see the Liverpool Beatles tourism machine really work and see how it works and get to know, okay, well, who's the tour guide to avoid, or which is the better tour to see? When you're there for a finite amount of time, you don't really know those things. So you learn to pick up on those things very quickly, and the history and all the political battles of what went on, and even getting the Cavern rebuilt. And the struggle that Liverpool went through. They demolished the original Cavern in 1973. It was going to be for a supposed underground railroad tunnel that never went through. Okay. And which we were told was, just the Liverpool Town Council not being happy that the Beatles packed up and left away, and they didn't care about Liverpool, and they're going to just demolish the Cavern. And but it's nice to see in the last 30, 40 years that's totally changed, and now you have a whole economy of tourism based on what the Beatles are. It's wonderful to see.
Gotcha. Let's move to this. I have it, and people have talked very highly of your thesis, and unfortunately, don't hate me, but I haven't read it yet.
That's okay. That's okay.
But people who have spoken very highly of it. So why don't you just take a few minutes and talk about that, and when you wrote it, and and
sure,
what was your thinking on it?
Well, thanks. Well, my thesis, my thesis for the class for Liverpool Hope University was I called it Listen to me, I can't think of what I called it.
Can a Beatle have wings?
Thank you. It's been a long. It's called "Can a Beatle Have Wings?" The story of Paul McCartney after the demise of the Beatles. And I chose that topic because having read just about all the major books and biographies in my life, I always felt that Paul McCartney was always very treated unfairly in the press, mainstream press, fandom, you name it, for breaking up the Beatles. And especially in his treatment in their reviews of his music.
And it's just funny, isn't it, how times have changed? Not to interrupt.
No.
Nowadays. I mean, he can't do anything wrong.
Can't do anything wrong. And that hypocrisy is what fueled my decision to write that paper and that thesis. And case in point, and it's the timing was fortuitous because when I wrote this is right when the archive campaign kind of got kicked back up again. So when I was writing this, I'm looking up, the original 1971 review of Ram by, I think it was Landau, who said it was, just terrible. I forget exactly what he called it, but he told it, he was just vilified Ram. And here we are now, 30 years later. Now it's a wonderful piece of work. And, I know that, and speaking to people who had that album at the time, again, my father, he thought it was great. So I think that because of the way that the Beatles ended, journalists, especially music journalists, painted him and were very, very unfair to his music. And because he was the one that legally had to dissolve the Beatles, and he was a very easy target to do that, especially coming off the backbone of such, high water marks like Abbey Road, and then he's putting out stuff like, the McCartney album, which he just recorded at home. And people were expecting, another magnum opus for his first. And I think people were just totally not realistic and not sympathetic with what he had to deal with. And that was the genesis for the paper. So I had to comb through. So I covered basically the Wings era of this, and I combed through. And as I mentioned, I spent loads of time at the British Library combing through periodicals, original Rolling Stone reviews, any New York Times reviews, to illustrate this point. That they were, and just to paint this show that really the critics were very, very unfair to him at that time. But in the proceeding, now, as you had mentioned, now, he can't do anything wrong. And my viewpoint is there was nothing wrong back then. You just were looking at it through a very, very unfair lens.
Gotcha. Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. I definitely have to get to it soon, so we can maybe talk a little bit more about it in a future episode. So, so as I said, it's wonderful to have you. I'm just happy as a little girl right now.
I'm very excited, and I'm thrilled that you reached out to me and we were able to connect this way to discuss this stuff, because even though we haven't met personally, we both speak the same language when it comes to this stuff. And I'm really excited about the future of Two Legs and making some really great episodes down the line.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Before we get into what we're going to be doing in the future, you also dabbled in podcasting before, we hooked up. So, talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, well, podcasting and having a couple radio shows. I did some podcasting in my college years with some friends where we basically just sat around like you and I are doing right now, except it was in person, talking about our favorite music, not necessarily Beatles or McCartney related, but picking an album and just kind of just dissecting it and why. I also launched my own podcast earlier this year called The Backwards Traveler, which I've only done one episode because, as you know, they are very time-consuming. But that's also very McCartney and Beatles driven. But obviously Two Legs is kind of our baby now, and I'm going to devote a lot of energy to that. And I'll continue Backwards Traveler at a pace that I'm comfortable with, but it's out there if anybody wants to take a look at it. Also, when I was in Liverpool, I did host my own radio show on the college radio station, which was quite fun. Which was called the Beatles Backspin, and it's really funny. College radio, they kind of like if you're willing to do it, they'll take you. So having no experience about the board operations or the mixer.
So you went into it with no experience at all?
None.
Okay. Wow.
None. Right. I met the station manager. He showed me, okay, this is how you get the radio IDs. This is how you get the jingles. This is how you load your music. Here's when the mic's on. Here's when the mic's off. Good luck. See you later.
Wow.
And I did that while I was over there too, and I got very comfortable with it. So yeah, I've always wanted to do this, And as you well know, you're a part of Talk More Talk. You've gotten two legs off the ground. It is a very time-consuming thing, and these are all side ventures for most of us, because we're all we're not independently wealthy. But I think it's nice that if people in a community have a passion and want to bring some stuff to attention that's largely ignored or neglected by other people, I think it's our job to and if we have the vehicle and the means to get it out there to people, let's do it. And that's kind of what we're doing, and I'm very happy and excited about that.
Right. When I first was thinking about doing this podcast with David, I had reached out to Ken Michaels because I know he had doing things we said today and part of the original Fab Forum.
Sure.
I reached out to him and talked to him about it, for a few, and he had said once you start, it's never going to stop, And I got to tell you, the 3 years that we've been doing this, I mean, the books, the music, the video, I mean, it doesn't end. There's just so much there to see, hear, read, learn. It's just an amazing continuous adventure. It's just really nonstop, really.
Great point. And because I think especially, and we touched upon this before also, we spoke, in the last 5 or 6 years, the amount of content that is just being pushed out there is off the charts. I mean, we were lucky if we got a release like, the
BBC.
Yeah, you got BBC Live at the BBC came out in 1994, and we were like, oh my God, this is great. And then you had the anthologies a couple of years later. And now in the last year, you're getting the Imagine Deluxe box, White Album box, Egypt Station, Ringo releases, all even like the vinyl that's being reissued, Ringo's vinyl that's being repushed, and then Abbey Road and the book. So even though people can say, well, how could there be what can you possibly talk about or learn from the Beatles? They've been broken up for 50 years. Well, let me tell you, people, there's lots. There's lots. If you care to dive in and really dive in, there is plenty, So I think that's why you look at this, the Beatles podcasting community. It's really exploded off the charts because there is so much to tackle. There really is.
And there's plenty of room for it. I mean, not one podcast can handle it all. So,
no.
I definitely support everybody out there doing this. I think there's a lot of room for everybody to do it, and it's a lot of fun. I enjoy seeing what everybody else is doing. And it's cool. It's great. And
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. And I think one of the challenging things about doing a dedicated McCartney podcast like we're doing, again, to the naive listener, that might know 5 or 10 of Paul McCartney's best songs, they don't know that he's done the albums with the Firemen or classical albums or Ocean's Kingdom or any of this work that he's done or any of the animated stuff that he's done. There's so much to tackle just aside from the man's main core discography. The films, anything. I mean, there's so much to tackle. So
it's 49 years of nonstop work,
right?
Whether or not it's in written form, music form, video form, it's nonstop.
It's nonstop, and there's more than enough around to go around and dissect and get out there and tell people about.
Right. That's true. That's very true. So moving forward now with you aboard. Right now we're messing around with video right now. We're just recording the audio right now because these next two shows are just going to be more of introductions with you. And next week we're going to be introducing Dylan Sevey, who's doing the music contributions for the show. He's also going to be doing other stuff later on that we'll get to while he's here next week. But yeah, I think the big thing is that I'm glad that we're both agreeing that video is a really cool aspect, and it's something that not everybody's doing, and we'll probably be the first McCartney based video cast out there. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I'm excited to get into the video format for this podcast, as you guys do so well with Talk More Talk. I think that's a wonderful format and a way to connect with people, because anybody can drive and listen to a podcast, and we all do that, but when you can connect somebody with a voice and a face and see it, and actually,
Right.
and the way that you guys do it every other Monday is just tremendous. I mean, and
Right.
you see the community of fan base you have there, several of whom are friends of mine, and we legitimately look forward to it because it's nice to, and then and again, it's an extension of our community and connecting everybody and seeing where everybody's kind of going. Like say, Kit, for example, was at Rochester, and I was able to follow her and do what she did.
Exactly.
And without I would not following Talk More Talk, I wouldn't have known Kit and gotten to see what she's done. So it just becomes a branch, an extension, and a network of all these great people and what they do.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So besides the video aspect of the show, we're basically going to keep the formula the same. We're going to keep it as two friends, two family members, whatever, talking about their favorite artists, and and we're going to keep it. It's also, again, it's an opinionated show. We're going to have our opinions, and hopefully we'll have disagreements, and we'll have some heated discussions.
I'm sure. If we agree on everything, that's not good. But I'm sure we will have plenty of disagreements.
Right. Yeah. I do too. But the good thing about it is I'm sure we're both grown up enough to be friendly about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. So you don't like Red Rose Speedway? Okay.
Yeah. Right. Well, I don't like the whole thing.
Right.
But anyways, since Two Legs have been last been on since June, I believe, I did my review of the McCartney concert here in Phoenix, Arizona. There's been a lot that's been going on, and we're going to just go over a few things while we're here. And one of the main items that's come out is the Grand Dude book. Hey Grand Dude, was that something that you picked up or even bothered to look at?
I did buy it, not for myself. I did buy it for my nephew, who's a year and a half old, so my sister could read it to him. But I did buy it. I did take a look at some of the images online. Again, another foray, an area for Paul to get into, children's books, So I'm not surprised. Did you pick it up?
Yeah, I have a copy, and it's very beautifully illustrated by Catherine Durst. It looks like it's a cool read. I flipped through it for a minute too. I do plan on, whether it's going to be on the Two Leg page or the Talk More Talk page, I'm going to do a live reading of it, which
cool.
Yeah. I mean the audio, if you get the audio, which is only available in the UK, the audio book, I think it's just under 13 minutes long.
Oh, so it's quick, very quick.
Yeah, right. But so it'll probably only take me about 2 days to read it then. So, but anyways, it should be a quick read, and look forward to doing that. And yeah, it's beautiful. I really enjoy it. It looks good so far.
What?
And
there's a couple pages I did see online, and the ones that my sister showed me. It looks very well illustrated. And I did see him. Of course, he promoted it on CBS with Stephen Colbert last week. So I did see some of those clips as well. Right.
Yeah. We talked about that on Talk More Talk last week, or on our last show, and from my understanding it was promoted as a live taping, but then I was also finding out that it was actually taped in July.
Oh wow!
Yeah, which kind of makes sense because they were talking about the movie yesterday and whether or not Paul went to go see it at the theater.
Oh, you're right. You're right.
Yes, he said that he snuck in disguise.
Yeah, I did. I saw him, and that makes sense because the movie came out in June, right?
Right. Yeah.
And then and there was no mention. He didn't even mention any of the big, Abbey Road news that's been out there.
Yeah, either. And then he didn't mention the next thing we're going to talk about is the new Polaroid book, the Linda McCartney Polaroid diary.
Yeah.
Which is now on Amazon for pre-order. I'm sure you could probably go on paulmccartney.com and order it, or the how do you pronounce that? Tashin?
Tashin, I believe, or Tashin.
Yeah, so I'm sure you can go on that website as well and pre-order the book. I didn't see when it came out. I know it's this year. But I'll have to double check, and I'm sure I'll probably end up picking it up, and we'll have it all over our social media pages and whatnot. And,
it's not cheap, but again, it's Linda's photos, and as we know, if you've looked at any of the archive series, her work and contributions with her photography have just been tremendous. And all
Absolutely.
all the Beatles and Paul's own archive releases, they are such a crown jewel of all these sets. I think everybody can agree.
Absolutely. Yeah, so him and his family, they've been out promoting the book already, and we've seen pictures of the book, and it looks pretty nice. I mean, it looks about the same size as a vinyl.
Yes.
A record. So I mean, it looks pretty big, and look forward to it. I love her. The Linda McCartney life and photography, and photographs. I think that's an excellent book too. When you see all of her early work with Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
And Lennon and Mick and Keith and especially Paul.
Sure.
It's great stuff.
Yeah, I think it's Linda McCartney Sixties. Is that what the name of that book, or is that a different one?
No, Linda McCartney Life in Photographs.
Okay, there's also another one called Linda McCartney's Sixties, I think, and that also has a lot of the same photos that she did.
Right.
With, all the ones at the Fillmore of Jimmy and all those other early ones that she did in New York.
Right. So a lot of good stuff there, so look forward to that. We're going to talk next about a book that came out about a week and a half ago, and that is by my co-host on Talk More Talk. And have you ever got to meet Ken Womack?
I have not met Ken Womack. We've conversed, via email and stuff, but I have not.
Okay.
And it's funny because we're both from the same part of the area,
Right,
which is funny.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's because I was kind of expecting that we would have met at the last year's White Album Symposium, but you weren't there, I guess.
No, I did not make that. I could not make that.
Okay, gotcha. But the book is called Solid State: The Story of Abbey Road and the End of the Beatles, and it's a beautiful book. You've already started to dig into it, right?
Yeah. I'm up to chapter 3. I got it about a week ago,
Okay.
so it's. I enjoy it. I enjoy it because I'm not a technical person or a musician, so learning all about the consoles that were in Abbey Road at the time, and Ken's use of it and the way how he describes them all. Again, you learn something new every day, and I'm learning something new with this book. And again, I just started chapter 3, which I believe is called Tales of Men and Moog, and that actually sounds pretty interesting because I'm sure he's going to get into how the Beatles brought the Moog synthesizer in, and they were one of the first groups to get the Moog and use it, and of course it was used prominently on that album. So
right, yeah, I'm looking forward to digging into the book as well. I have quite a few of Womack's books, definitely, his encyclopedia, his two volume set on George Martin. So I'm really looking forward to
pick up the Cambridge.
Pick it up.
Pick it up. Yeah, and also don't forget. Also, this is a little plug because it was my Bible in Liverpool. It was Ken's Cambridge Companion to the Beatles. That is a tremendous. It's actually an edited collection of works of essays and sections of books that Ken just edited down into one book, and it was really, really well done.
Okay, well, we will put forth the effort to get Womack here on Two Legs in the future to talk about Solid State.
Awesome.
And, I look forward to having him back on Two Legs. So, speaking of someone that we're going to have on Two Legs is a gentleman named Adrian Allen. He had just released a book called Paul McCartney After the Beatles, A Musical Appreciation. Now, one of the last things David and I we're going to do, we're to interview Adrian Allen, and we did, but however, unfortunately, we had some technical difficulties, and thankfully, Adrian was nice enough to reschedule, and so now this, instead of David and I, this is the last thing David and I do, it's going to be the first interview that you and I do, so I'm looking forward to that.
Cool.
And, and that's going to happen in October, and looking forward to that. I have dug into quite a bit of the book. It's told in a musician's perspective. It's
very complex.
Really,
very complex.
Right, all about keys and notes and chord production. So I mean, if you're not a musician, some of it might go over your head, but it's really cool. The song selections that he picked for this book. Really cool. I mean, some of my favorite songs are in this book, so I was really curious reading some of my favorite songs and, and how, Paul brought them to life, with the notes and all that stuff. So if you're into that kind of thing, I really recommend you check out Adrian Allen's book, Paul McCartney After the Beatles. So look forward to talking with him in a couple weeks.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The next thing that we're going to talk about is the project. Well, not really the project, but Ringo's got a new album coming out in October. And again, yeah, this will be his 20th, record, CD, album, whatever you want to call it. Which is amazing to think that Ringo is going to have 20 records out.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, because he did have that little break there in the '80s where pretty much
yeah, he was making he
couldn't give those albums away.
No, and he was making Heineken commercials.
Right, exactly, right. Yeah, I'm talking with trains.
Yeah.
And that album's going to be called "What's My Name." Now, it was first discussed that the song that Ringo and Paul collaborated on, the John Lennon song "Grow Old With Me," was going to be the first release. However, it turned out to be the track "What's My Name," which I thought was maybe the better idea to release a more up-tempo song to kick off the album. However, the last time Paul shared vocals with Ringo, I think, was on the Why Not album with Walk With Me.
Walk with You, or Walk With Me.
Walk With You, yeah.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
Which, I'll be honest with you, I'm not the biggest fan of Ringo as a ballad singer, or more of like a mellow type song singer. So I'm kind of curious to hear his vocals and to hear how, Paul's older vocals will, mix with the song. So,
yeah, it's going to be interesting to hear. I actually initially, when I first heard this coming out, I thought what they were doing was adding to Lennon's original version and just kind of doing like a Free as a Bird thing again. But they're just redoing it. So it would have been cool if they had kind of done the Free as a Bird route again and just added themselves to it. But
right.
Picturing Ringo singing this one, we'll see. Hopefully Paul can add a little more to it and help it on. But I know it's a nice gesture, and I know that I did read some nice comments about. Ringo did say that it's John's song, and that there's a section there where it reminded him of George, and he said in some kind of weird way we're all kind of all four of us are represented in this song. So that was a nice sentiment that he shared.
Right. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. By the time this episode gets posted, the album should be about 3 weeks away, and I think it's piqued quite a few people's curiosity. Not only is he working with Paul again, but he's covering a Lennon song.
Yeah.
So that should be interesting.
He's the Energizer Bunny. He just keeps going.
Keeps going.
He just keeps going.
Yeah, those jumping jacks just keep on going. Lastly, last week I think it's been 2 weeks ago now, we found out that Paul McCartney and James Corden won the Emmy for the was it a pre-recorded special? I believe the title was
the Carpool Karaoke.
Yeah, the Carpool Karaoke. Yeah. So they were nominated for that, and they had won. They beat out other top-notch artists like Beyonce and Bruce Springsteen for this. But I was reading earlier that this is his fourth Emmy in this and I think in this Carpool Karaoke days. So he's no stranger to winning these Emmys.
No. Well, they're always tremendous segments, no matter who he does. But. Obviously, the McCartney one really touched a nerve. I mean, people that I know that aren't even McCartney fans just came up to me and they were like, "I was really moved by that special. They really enjoyed it." So if it's reaching those kind of people that aren't really into it, then it's obviously it was well done, and it certainly was.
Oh, it was absolutely well done. It was, and I think that's the thing that everybody was talking about was how moving, that special was, especially when. He tells Corden that, Corden was talking about his father or grandfather or something like that.
His grandfather is, I think.
Grandfather, yeah. And then, and Paul says, and he's here, with us now. Yeah. And almost, he brought a tear to Corden's eye. I mean, the stuff going back to his old home was nice. seeing him perform live was nice. It was just all together, like you said. It was just put together so well.
It was. It really was, and especially for me with my Liverpool connection, it
Right.
struck another chord because
Right.
the bar that he played at, or I should say the pub. Let me put it in proper UK
Yeah.
speak. The pub was the Philharmonic Pub, which is actually
Right.
just adjacent to Lipa, which is in kind of in downtown Liverpool.
Okay.
So seeing that, and I had been to that pub many times. So they're seeing that, and that whole scene of just the people at the bar and the curtain goes up. I mean, it was just everything about that special was from the beginning to the end. I mean, if I had one slight complaint, is that the song choices were a little bit too generic.
Well, yeah.
But I mean, listen, he was in Liverpool, so you were going to hear Penny Lane and.
Right.
Let it be.
Right.
But again, that's kind of the McCartney geek in me, wanting to, but.
Well, that's the common. The common thing that we complain about the most is the song selections he does for whether it's live set or the specials that he does, whether it's at the Grand Central Station or the YouTube was it the Grand Central Station? Yeah. And his live shows, it's always the set list and what can he do to really improve on that? I mean. Maybe one day he can he whip out a Rocky Raccoon or a Maxwell Silver Hammer every once in a while?
Yeah,
or,
I don't know.
Maybe something from the 80s,
Yeah,
Spies Like Us.
Stranglehold, I'll take it.
Right.
I think he does his best job that he can. He caters to the masses, but he also tries to change it up a little bit to appease people like you and I. Because what he's doing now is he wants to tour in this kind of big concert way, and he's going to do it that he's not going to go a Bob Dylan route and just change it all up and just do one thing. He's just going to play his show his way, and that's how he wants to do it. And listen, he's earned that right. And you know what? If he was playing in Phoenix next week, you'd see him, and if he was playing in New York next week, I'd see him too.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no denying that. And that's the thing is we complain about it, but we end up having such a great time.
Correct. And
seeing Ringo 2 months ago. Another thing that we complain about is Ringo's song selections and his live show. But you get there, and it's such an amazing time that you just forget about it.
You forget about it, because because you realize that this could be the last time that I see this person, or
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, Andy, do you want to give out your contact information or anything like that? If people want to get in touch with you, or
sure. Well, you can find me. You can find me on Facebook, just Andy Nicholes. I'm on there. If you just go through, if you want to go through Tom's page on Two Legs, find me on there. I'm on Instagram, AJN909. You can send me an email at andynichols@gmail.com. And I'm, willing to kind of share and express any exchange ideas on anything, music or McCartney related anytime.
Right. Yeah. Well, like we said, we are going to continue with this show. I'm glad you're on board to do this show with me. It's going to be a hoot. You can reach out to us on our Facebook page, Two Legs, a Paul McCartney podcast. You can email us at twolegspodcast@gmail.com. We are on Twitter and on Instagram at Two Legs Podcast. So there's many ways you can reach out to us on this show. You can leave us, email or message. And, is there something that you'd like us to talk about? Maybe one day we'll pick a topic that a fan dishes out to us. There might be a time where Andy and I we can't agree on a topic, so we'll just go to a fan choice.
we can't agree. Just throw one at us, please.
Yeah, exactly. Right on. Yes, and I'm on Facebook as well. You can look me up, Tom Hunyady. And I'm always looking for people to talk solo McCartney with, even Beatle McCartney, because we will from time to time dig into McCartney as a Beatle as well. We definitely will next week. We'll give you a little hint on next week. We are going to talk about the Abbey Road box set, and we will discuss McCartney's songs on that box set. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to that. And just again, to wrap it up, Tom, thank you so much again for the invitation to join your great podcast. I've been following it for years, and you speak my passion, and I know we're going to get along great. We're going to produce some great shows and hopefully have some great people to bring on as guests.
Absolutely.
And I look forward to a long, a relationship in building this podcast and, getting it out there to people.
Cool, right on. Yeah, we've already got 2 or 3 guests already booked and more in the pipeline, and it's just a matter of having the time to do the stuff.
You know it.
Yeah. Well, as always, thank you everybody for joining us. As again, we're continuing the show. We're gonna ram on as Paul says. And once again, everybody, thank you. And as always, have a great day and a beautiful night.
See you next time.
Listening to Two Legs, a Paul McCartney podcast, hosted by Tom Hunyady and Andy Nicholes, with musical contributions by Dylan